My name is Larry Hockwald. I am the New York City and Long Island trainer and technical assistance facilitator for NIAPRIS. In case any of you recognize me, I am also the manager of the NIAPRIS Training Collective, and we have a very special presentation today that we're really looking forward to giving. We are doing a new supervisor's orientation about understanding your role. This is a 1-hour webinar with a CEU. I'll talk to you about that in a second. And this is not only a webinar in itself that you'll be getting a CEU for, but it is also introducing the topic and the content that we are going to be providing in statewide presentations starting this fall. Rob at the end will give you a date for the first one. We're going to be doing a 3-hour version of this for new supervisors every few months statewide. This is something we've been doing for several years now for new hires. We have something called the new hire orientation, and that's been so popular, people asked us to do one for new supervisors as well. And I am pleased to tell you that we've launched that this year. So there will be one CEU. In order to get the CEU, you must stay for the full presentation, which will be about an hour. And then within 24 hours, Zoom, you will get an automatic email with an evaluation link. In order to actually qualify and get a CEU certificate, you must both attend this webinar fully and then fill out the evaluation and get that back to us. You get the link will come in 24 hours or so within the next 48 hours after that, and then you will have fulfilled everything you need to do to get the CEUs. So with that, I don't want to take up any more time. Your presenters today are Robert Statham and David Ferens, and they are our trainers from, Robert is from the Western New York, highest part of the state. David is right in the middle in the Hudson Valley region, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves when they begin to speak. So, and as I said, Robert will at the end, will let you know when we're going to have the 3-hour full presentation for new supervisors so that your different agencies and programs across the state can make sure to send you new supervisors. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. We got a lot more people who joined, so it was good I took up that time while people signed on. I'm going to turn it over to Rob and have a wonderful presentation, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And so we're really pleased. We actually just got this out last week, and to have as many people as we're seeing today is just wonderful. And after a holiday, no doubt. So we're really pleased about that. Again, my name is Rob Statham. I am the Western Region, Central Region trainer for the collective, but my background has supervision in it. I was a supervisor in the nonprofit world for 9 years, actually closer to 10, and then another 10 years in the for-profit world. I managed a hotel for a number of years. And I will say that being a nonprofit supervisor or manager is a lot harder than for-profit, because in the not-for-profit, we're not just concerned with profit, we're also concerned with mission. So my hat's off to all of you who are part of this class here in terms of supervision today. So we wanted to put together a presentation for new supervisors who come into the field. Maybe you were promoted based on your work before, which may not have had a lot of supervision in it. So we thought, let's start from ground zero, give people what they really need to be successful. And that's kind of how this came about. David.
Yes, my name is David Ferens. I too have done supervision in kind of the nonprofit, for-profit world too. I was in a monastery and took care of their for-profit entity for about 10, 15 years. And have been working here with NIAPRIS for about 6 years with the collective for I think 3. I think it's 3 now. So I'm really excited to be with you today. This is a great training and it introduces an awful lot of what we're doing. The 3-hour training I think will be useful, but we also have trainings on difficult conversations, on strength-based supervision, a number of other trainings as well that your organization can get from us as well. So Rob. Let's do this.
All right, well, let's start off with the Niagara's commercial. We consider ourselves a change agent dedicated to improving services. We're very big on public policy. Our CEO, Harvey Rosenthal, spends a great deal of time talking to legislators and important people and really advocating for the resources that we need to do the jobs that we do. And we're always advocating, educating, innovating, and celebrating. And as Larry said, that David and mine and Larry's role is really the education piece for providers across the state. But let's get into the learning objectives for today. And the first is to identify what skills are necessary for your first-time supervisors. We're also going to talk about trauma-informed supervision, what that looks like, what are the core skills necessary really to be successful in that type of work. And our third topic is something about quiet quitting. And we probably heard that term. It's grown in popularity during the pandemic. But quite honestly, it's always been there. We just kind of finally labeled it. But we'll talk about that on what kind of effect that has on not just staff, but the supervisor. So our starting point is this. It's all about relationships. And Larry and David and I, we do a lot of training on helping people with psychiatric disabilities. And we're always talking about relationships. Same thing applies to supervisors in terms of the relationships that you have with the people that you support and you really serve, for that matter. So this idea of being in relationship with the person that you may be supervising, it does so much for the person that you're supervising as well as yourself. And so we just don't want to think of the people that we're supervising as workers. We want to kind of see the whole person. And we've seen throughout the pandemic, quite honestly, people have brought things into the workforce kind of heavy, through COVID and a lot of trauma that's occurred during the COVID period. Thankfully, we're kind of moving out of it, but still we've seen an increase in mental health, difficulties on the job. And we want to meet people where they're at, and that includes the people that we're supporting. And that relationship is going to get you further probably than anything else that we're talking about today. David, do you want to add anything on this slide?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think that one of the things with the relationships is to recognize, especially dealing with younger workers, and I'm thinking millennials and Gen Z, that they've been through a lot with the pandemic in the last several years. And for us to recognize that people are, younger people are bringing in problems that some of us who might be in our 30s and up may not have had to deal with. So we're going to be looking at some of those ideas as well, especially around things like quiet quitting. So I would encourage us to think in terms of our younger workers as well as those more seasoned.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about the relationship, the first thing that I think about is how are we engaging with the people that we support? Because it's this connection that is the catalyst for everything. So when you're talking about engaging with people, it really relates to these things that you're doing in that relationship, by facilitating, by helping people take ownership of the message of the organization, or even the message in terms of what they do. We want to really help people become inquisitive about what they're doing. And we have a whole, we have other trainings where we talk about the why of why we're working and why we do what we do. The same thing here, help people kind of discover why they chose that career, because maybe some people have been in their career a long time and they've actually forgotten. They're too busy just kind of doing the hamster wheel thing, and we just forget what we're doing. So we really want to help create that curiosity and help people really discover new things. Listen. So when we're listening to people, we want to give people their full attention, or our full attention. These things here, while they're great for communication, sometimes they're not. When I'm texting somebody as I'm, talking to someone, we want to block out the distractions and give people what they need from us in terms of that communication. And when we're on our phones, when we're talking to somebody, we're sending a message, you're not first. I really, I have other things that are more important than you. Also, the innovation piece, we have seen through COVID how innovative we can be. And so you may have to be a little bit innovative in the way that you're communicating your message. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think, people learn in different styles. So we may have to use different communication methods and adapt our way. And then the final thing here is really the connection piece. Ensure a personal, relevant, and really powerful message that you have or connection with that person, and treat people as individuals. David?
And I think a lot of this, especially if we've been promoted from the ranks, a lot of this is a different viewpoint of our coworkers and the people that we served with for a long time, as we're listening and innovating and connecting, because we are now in a new role within that group. And for us to be able to facilitate, cultivate curiosity, and helping people to move forward in ways that they may not have experienced us before.
David, you've got great timing, because the next slide is just that, about, when you have moved from a line worker, just for lack of words here, to that supervisor, you're initially feeling proud. You rose to the ranks of supervision or supervisor. You were promoted. That you feel happy and proud about those things. And you've, like I said, you've moved from maybe being a really expert in one and service delivery probably, and now you've got a whole new thing, a whole new set of skills that you have to learn. So it's like starting over for a lot of folks. And then, you start to really think not just about yourself in terms of planning and things like that. You're now planning for the team. And so that's different. You're organizing for the team, you're communicating, motivating a team rather than yourself. It is a different, it's a different set of skills that you may need. And that's exactly why we, like I said earlier, we put together this training, because we saw individuals that, or heard from individuals actually, that were really good in their previous job, and now they're a supervisor and they need more skills to do effective work. And so that was the genesis really of putting this thing together. David, what have you seen?
Well, I think we have a video in the in the full training, and it talks about that we're no longer just responsible for the work, we're responsible for the people who are responsible for the work. And that is a new phase, a new way of looking at the people around us and being responsible for caring for them to see that they're getting what they need as we move forward. So I think that idea of communication, motivating, organizing, and planning for the team, especially since as a supervisor, you exist between upper management and the people on the ground. So you're in a new position in between. So you're getting information from up on high, so to speak, and communicating it in ways that are going to make sense and motivate the people that you're supervising.
Yeah, that middle is sometimes a scary place to be.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
So we put together a couple tips here for new supervisors. And the first thing is find comfort in your role. Not all supervisors act the same. Not all supervisors are the same. You have to find your comfort level in your new role. And once you're comfortable, people respond. People will see you in that role. But it's finding that comfort level, and training is really important. We believe in IAPRIS anyway, to kind of find your role and learn new things. And obviously going right back to that relationship thing, that's important as well. Spend time with the people that you're supervising. We know that you're busy. Supervisors are always busy. There's meetings to attend. There's reports that need writing, but there's no substitute for spending time with the people that you're supervising. Because that's that area where you can connect, where you can grow with that person. Be an example. to your colleagues. And most people have already been that example when they weren't supervisors. So it's a very easy role for you to slip into. If you've been promoted, you more than likely were already that example. So just kind of moving that, continuing in that role of being an example to your colleagues is just as important. You yourself continue learning. There's always things to learn. I learned from the trainings that I deliver, from people that are in that class. There's no substitute for continuing learning and getting better. And finally, this one's really important. Do not make decisions out of emotional reactions. Now, all of us on the call have probably done that before, maybe in our personal lives. We've said things that we wish I hadn't said out of the heat of being angry. But we don't make good decisions based on emotional reactions. We make better decisions out of our emotional intelligence, and kind of, instead of reacting to things, kind of reasoning and thinking before I make that decision. That's a really, really important one, because we'll step in it if we don't do that. David?
Yeah. And I was going to say, Rob, one of the things about making those decisions out of emotional reactions, a lot of times what happens is that supervisors start taking things personally that are not intended personally. When people are frustrated with the job or with the organization, and they take it out on the supervisor, which is the normal place to take it out because there's no place else to do it. And for us to remember, we can't take that personally. It's not about us. And in spending time with subordinates, this is one of the reasons for regular supervision, to be able to give people that hour a week, whatever it is that you can do, so that you have a chance to understand the subordinate, they have a good chance to understand you, and you're better able to talk about the person's frustration so that it doesn't come boiling out. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. So what makes a good supervisor? Obviously, maintaining a positive attitude is pretty much a no-brainer. You're a leader. So you have to maintain that positive attitude. And sometimes, and I've been there, and probably David's been there, but maybe there's some things that, we're kind of, I don't want to say disgruntled, but we're worried about. But we still have to reflect that this is a can-do type attitude, because the team will be looking for you, or looking at you in terms of your attitude. And they may model your negative attitude if you do have that negative attitude. So it's important that we maintain that positivity, ensure that we're going to get through this. Those are really important things for people in recovery, but it's important for us too, for people that serve people in recovery. I mentioned before about how people learn in different ways. You may have some individuals that are visual learners. You may have some individuals that give them the handbook and they're happy, or the new orientation handbook and they're happy. Others learn through relationships. And so it's important to know your people well enough. Again, back to that relationship thing. It's important to know the people that you're supporting well enough to know how they learn. Because if I'm trying to educate someone or help somebody learn in a way that's not useful to them, or they just can't get, it's going to be much harder. Not that they're going to not be able to pick it up, but it's going to be harder, and it's going to take longer. And so we want to, take the time to get to know what each person's learning style is. Always allow for questions and debate when applicable. Not everything is up to a debate, and that's kind of the difference between, leadership and not being a leader. A leader actually makes decisions, and sometimes they're unpopular, and they're non-debatable in a lot of ways. So sometimes there won't be a debate. We have to make a decision, and that's okay. That's our role. That's in our role. But the questions are obviously are welcome as well, and that just again cements that relationship.
Yeah, and
go ahead, David.
On questions and debate and difficult conversations, again, when we're talking about younger workers, people are used to being able to question. People are used to asking foundational questions about things. And for us to be able to speak with people and help them understand what the decisions are, what the rationale is behind certain things, for you, remember that you're in a privileged position of getting information that not everybody gets. And so to be able to divulge information that is appropriate and to engage in the hard conversations with people around what is appropriate and not appropriate to know and to proceed in. So questions and debate, when applicable, I think is really important. And at the same time, to recognize that work, while I encourage you to give me any of your questions, and I'm glad to talk to you, ultimately, it's not a democracy. I have to make a decision, and I have to be able to be okay with that decision. And I hope that you're okay too. So, when applicable is important.
And honestly, David, I'll add that the fact that if you have a good relationship with that person, that goes down a lot easier when you have to make that decision. Even if they disagree with that decision, just the fact that you're in relationship with that person makes it a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, and confidence breeds confidence. I think when people recognize that you're acting in their best interest, they're more willing to cut slack to the supervisor. When the supervisor has a bad attitude or is not communicative, then everything that you do can be suspect. So the idea of creating confidence in the person is important.
And I just also want to add a little bit about the difficult discussions that we sometimes have to have. If we're not having those discussions, we're not trusting the people that we're supervising, and we're not just trusting, we're not believing in them in a lot of ways that they could handle a difficult discussion. Now, granted, some of these discussions are tough, and it's tough on them and it's tough on us. But these are conversations that may help a person grow and develop and course correct if things aren't going well. So we owe it to people to actually have these discussions, as hard as they are. I don't like difficult discussions. I'm sure David or Larry doesn't. But are they necessary? And I would say, yeah, they're necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so David kind of talked a little bit about this, that there is a power differential between you and the person that you're supporting. And it's built right into your title. So we don't have to lord it over people because it's there in the title. And people recognize, for the most part, they recognize that there is a power differential. But it does not mean we can't work collaboratively with the person. And some of those, models of rapport, maybe, trust and caring and those kinds of things. Those are important piece of the equation here. We can work and we should work in collaboration with people that we're supporting. But again, as David said, there's going to be times when it doesn't look like a democracy because I'm making the decision. I'm making decisions that have to be made, hopefully with the person's input. But again, there will be times when we just have to assert the power that's been given us in our roles. And so, again, if you have that solid relationship with that person, that's just going to make it much better. The other thing that I just want to make mention here is the collaborative supervisory relationship looks, it goes both ways in terms of feedback. It's not just me doling out feedback as a supervisor to my team. I welcome feedback as to things I could be doing better as a supervisor with my team. So it kind of goes both ways, and that's really what we're talking about when we talk about this collaborative working relationship with people.
Yeah, I was told, I taught for a while in my previous life, and I asked my brother, who was a teacher for many, many years, about what makes a good teacher. He said, think about your best teachers. And so think about your best supervisors when we're talking about power differential and the like, and how were things explained to you at the best times, and to be able to take that as your model when you felt that you were heard, that you were understood, even if what you wanted didn't come to pass. So to be able to take those as good examples for how to move forward and perhaps improve on.
So yeah, David, I'll add coach, teacher/coach. The best supervisors are coaches, really.
Right.
That are, they're doing that education piece, but they're also saying, yeah, you can do this. They have confidence. I like how you use that word confidence, by the way. They have confidence in, or they build confidence in this person that they're supporting. And there's no substitute for that. There really is none. So now we want to hear from you. As if you can recall when you first came into being a supervisor, what are some of the challenges that you initially had? And if we're going to ask you to put things into the chat box, and we'll take a look and get to them and comment. But what were some of the challenges that you initially faced when you were that first-time supervisor?
I'm keeping an eye open on the chat here.
Alrighty.
Began supervising peers, feeling as though other leadership didn't value my opinions as much. Yeah. Going from coworker, friend to supervisor, that is hard to do. Supervising people who are significantly older and have more experience, supervising a staff that I was at the same title as previously. Others not taking me seriously and not really listening, supervising older peers, staff challenging you, not being available when I needed support, unhappy staff. Yeah. And a lot of this supervising those who are older, more technically qualified. That's, yes, that can be hard. And I think that in a lot of this, to my mind, you know, that you're not the best at what is being done by the people you're supervising. Your position is to be able to encourage them and empower them to be better and to keep growing in their own roles. They didn't trust my opinion and would second guess or push back. That's really hard to deal with. Bringing up staff morale, that's rough.
You know, David, when I'm thinking
a lot of that has to do with building those relationships and continuously being there as the moral support for people as they move through.
You know, David, and reading some of these comments, I'm kind of reminded of when I was, you know, a supervisor, and I had to kind of come in after someone had not done such a good job, and you know, their staff was in disarray and things like that. And if you look at that situation, it wasn't the best situation to start in, but actually, in hindsight, it was, because there was nowhere to go but up. So if you're able to, you know, start in a, you know, you're kind of walking into a landmine, getting through that landmine may be difficult, but when you do, you have people that will follow you anywhere because of the work that you've done. I also want to kind of talk a little bit about the, if you being a younger supervisor, because I was a hotel manager at 24. And almost my entire staff was older than me. That was difficult. There was a belief that, oh, what does this kid know, type of thing, about supervision and things like that. And I really had to lean on my relationship skills to really convince people that I was the person for the job. So I totally get that when people put that into the chat box about kind of managing older workers when you're a little bit younger. Because that can be a challenge.
I think one of the things that Bridget put in about people struggling with change, I think we always have to remember that change can be messy at the best of times. And that when people have been used to doing something in a certain way, or when the supervisor, for example, who was there has retired or moved forward in the organization, and you're coming in with new ideas and new thoughts, you know, to be able to introduce changes slowly if you can, but sometimes those changes come down from higher up to you, and to be able to encourage people to move forward and to, you know, let people know it's okay for this to be messy. It's okay for it to be hard. We're in this together, and we can do this well.
And the other comment that I want to comment on is that, you know, you being a friend in your previous role, you know, because maybe you were both case managers together and then you were promoted. So there's almost like a loss that kind of happens when you can't be as friendly as you were with that person, because now you're supervising them. It's okay to feel that loss. It's hard. So that there's that messiness there, David. Kind of
Absolutely.
being
Yeah.
a friend to somebody.
Well, we have Laura and Lana who both said something interesting here. I think for Laura, you talked about staying in the background until things sort out. I think part of what I would encourage you is to step forward and ask questions of others and get as much input as possible so that you are seen as being interested and moving forward and being part of the process with other supervisors, with people. And for Lana, the idea of working with staff who don't see the value in the work that we do, people become jaded, and it's up to us to encourage people to move forward. And one of the things that I say in a lot of my trainings is, let's go back to our mission statement and see how are we working with our mission statement. And to be, encourage people to look at the mission and vision statement and say, am I living that out? And am I really taking care of and serving the people that come into us? And I think that that can encourage people to move forward and reignite passion.
So again, this is probably the hardest piece of supervision. It's the people, right?
Right.
And we've addressed some of these. Going from that team member to the supervisor can be uneasy. Introduction to peers has been messy at times with supervision. And maybe losing your confidence or your comfort level, as we said. So we talked about a lot of these things here. So let's talk about quiet quitting. I'm sure this is a term people have heard, especially during the pandemic, but I'm going to give you the official or semi-official. This is straight from the dictionary, Cambridge dictionary. So it's the activity of doing the work that you need to do in order to keep your job, but doing it without great enthusiasm or effort and without agreeing to do extra tasks. Quiet quitting describes a situation when an employee mentally and emotionally checks out, so they're kind of burned out and does the bare minimum to get by. And like I said earlier, there's nothing new about this. We've just labeled it. This has been going on probably since the day we started working. But it's happening, I think, and I don't know what your thoughts about this are, David. It got more prevalent during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people started, wondering about what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Especially people who are always working remotely, didn't have good contact with supervisors or coworkers, and were losing that sense of self in that. And, the reasons for quiet quitting, not having opportunities to learn and grow, not having someone at work who encourages their development, supervisors who were kind of checked out, not having someone at work who cares about them as a person. This is really important to millennials and Gen Z. We have to be there to support in ways that we may not have to support people who have been in the positions for a longer time. We have to remember that we have younger people who are new to the job. And then for people not knowing what is expected of them at work. And again, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people are still at 6s and 7s about what are we doing. Yeah.
And I'll make mention, David, that not knowing what is expected, that's like sending someone into a battle without any resources, basically.
Right, absolutely.
And this is especially important with onboarding. Onboarding is the welcome mat that you're thrown out. And if you're doing a really shoddy job with that onboarding or orientation, they're not feeling welcomed. And then the training piece, if a person's not trained, they're not confident, they feel like they're just kind of have been thrown into the mix to sink or swim. That's never a good thing to start out a new employee. That employee they won't last.
Right. They won't. And Ian, you put in there dealing with a staff member who found out she's not being paid the same. That's something that has to be addressed and quickly, because that's a great way, one, to lose a great employee, but it also may be a problem of labor law that you will want to look into. So I'm just encouraging you to take that very seriously and look into it.
Thank you, David. So we're going to move on to trauma-informed supervision. And also, I just want to let people know in the 3-hour statewide training that we'll be conducting. We will be expanding on all of these things that we're kind of going over with everybody today. You're kind of seeing the trailer or the sneak peek of the presentation for October. We'll get to that date at the end of the training here. But talking about trauma-informed supervision, supervisory skills that are trauma-informed and strength-based. Very important. So what do we mean? What do we mean by trauma-informed? David, if you could just kind of read this and
Yeah, an organizational structure and treatment framework that involves understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of all types of trauma. Trauma-informed care also emphasizes physical, psychological, and emotional safety for both consumers and providers, so we're included in that, and help survivors rebuild a sense of control and empowerment. Because we understand that we may not know who has been exposed to or a survivor of trauma, we incorporate this into our practice at all times and all interactions. This is especially true when we have difficult conversations with people. We don't know what people have been through. And for many of us who are dealing with peers or who are ourselves peers and have our own mental health issues, we have to be sensitive to what other people may be experiencing and what we may be experiencing as we move through life. So for us to be important to move into those relationships with care, with concern, and with compassion.
and obviously that people who have experienced trauma, they may be reacting to things that you say, not in the present sense, so to speak. They may be reacting based on their past trauma. So kind of recognize that, and really one of the best ways I know how is to use our emotional intelligence, not react to what they're reacting to. Because again, we want to be present with people. We want to help people become present with us in a way that is meaningful for them.
Right, absolutely.
So when we're talking about trauma-informed supervision, it acknowledges that these dynamics are occurring. And we seek to incorporate these concepts into our role of a supervisor in the way that we're communicating with people, in the way that we're taking action with individuals that we're supervising as well. So it's built right in. And again, when we're talking about a strength-based perspective, that is trauma-informed in and of itself. We'll examine and discuss the foundations of trauma-informed practice in the bigger training, what it would look like in supervision. And really, if you take a look at the picture on the slide there, help, support, advice, and guidance. Those aren't just words. That is the way that there are action-oriented way in which we will be supervising folks. David, do you want to talk a little bit about safety?
Yeah, safety is physical, psychological, and emotional when we're interacting with those who report to us. One of the things that we look at with what safety is the sense of control. What can I cede control to so that and still maintain sufficient control in building a sense of empowerment so that the person has a sense of a sense of power in the interaction as well. We don't want people to feel powerless. We want people to feel safe. We want them to feel that they can speak their minds. We want people to feel that they can react in reasonable ways so that they feel that they're getting what they need out of the relationship. Again, we have to maintain our own safety. We have to maintain boundaries, but we have to recognize that people need to be able to express those things for themselves as well. We don't want people who are simply docile and intimidated. We want people who are going to be straightforward with us and being able to express themselves honestly and completely.
David, this is an important concept really when we're talking about disciplinary conversations.
Yeah.
I'm being written up. I don't feel like I have any voice or any power in this. They just tell me to sign here. We have to create a sense of control, even in that environment, really, especially in that environment. Maybe that sense of control is these are the things that you can do to improve in terms of, why you were written up. This has got to be built into it, because otherwise you will get that passive person, as David kind of explained. We want people who are empowered to and feel like they have some control over a situation, because otherwise it won't work for that person. Looking at the chat, David?
Yes, I'm looking at the chat here. If we do not recognize it, not to be hard on ourselves when we make mistakes. I think, Laura, we can't know everything, and we can't know every person's trauma history, but we can be sensitive to it. And I'm going to say it this way: we have to trust people that we're supervising and that we're working with to be adults, and to be able to express to us, this is what I'm feeling in the moment, and to be able to respond to that in a way which is going to be helpful to the person. So recognizing that I cannot know everything, but I'm encouraging you to be able to tell me whatever you need to say, and to count on the person to do that. That's part of having difficult conversations.
Agreed. So this slide here really talks about this idea of reflective supervision. We're thinking, we're reflecting in our way on the ways that we're supervising. We're encouraging the person that we're supervising to be reflective in their work and our relationship with them. Again, this is the reflective process versus the emotional response that we sometimes say. We do not want that dynamic. We want a reflectful, thoughtful type of a relationship going both ways, as you see from the slide, and that is built on this idea of promoting, at least from the supervisor's response, to promote an understanding of what the worker brings to the situation that can either hinder or sometimes help the situation. And then the reflection back really promotes and supports the development of that relationship-based piece of that organization. So it really goes both ways here. And this is stuff from the National Council, which we really think very highly of.
Yeah, I think, Rob, one of the other things is that when people are coming from a peaceful place within themselves, from their parasympathetic nervous system, if I can put it this way, it is more likely that the other person will mirror that calm. And if the other person's upset, we have to be careful not to mirror that in response, but to be able to come from a place of peace, self-control, awareness, and the other person can then calm down and relax with us, because there's nothing there to fight. And the other person doesn't have to go into a fight or flight place. They can go into a more peaceful place, a place where they're coming from their prefrontal cortex, if I can put it that way, so that they're able to think and respond rather than react.
And we don't have a slide in this presentation on language, but language is important here. I can't tell you the number of times as a supervisor, I would say to somebody, "Hey, John, I need to see you in my office for a minute." And John's panicking because, I've been in that situation. Okay, why am I going to be called in the office here? And, most of the time when I said that, it wasn't a disciplinary thing. It was just, I want to talk about something. But that message was, I'm in trouble when I get called to the supervisor's office. So the language piece is kind of a big deal. And so we want to use, that strength-based language, that uplifting language in this supervisor relationship that we have with people. So let's talk about a supervisory mindset. And it's one based on growth, one based on optimism and hope for this person that we're supervising. We have high standards for people. We believe that they can grow. If I set the bar low for you, that I'm telling you, I don't think much about you. So we want to set the standards high, and if people don't reach them, well, that just means we need to work harder with this person and supporting them to reach those higher standards. And again, that just does really nice with that the concept of always learning, always growing, always developing. The other piece of this growth mindset is this belief, really, that mistakes are going to happen. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. David makes mistakes. We all make mistakes.
Wait a minute.
Well, okay, Dave. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
But, how do we view those mistakes? Are we viewing them as penalties? Because when you penalize, people are constantly penalized, they don't risk. They don't take chances, which sometimes risk and taking chances are actually good things. They allow for growth. So are we taking these mistakes as an opportunity to learn and grow rather than just a disciplinary thing? And that growth mindset kind of goes to the I can do anything, and my staff is capable. And this, in this growth mindset, people take responsibility for their failures because they know it's not just a trouble thing. I get in trouble. My supervisor is expecting me to learn from this. And that's really, really critical.
Yeah, that idea of failing successfully. What, yes, this went wrong. What can we learn so that you're able to move forward and do better, and to recognize that a mistake is not the end of the world.
Failing up is sometimes how I.
As I like to say to people, is there blood on the floor? If there's no blood on the floor, we're fine.
David, do you want to talk about what the fixed mindset
Oh,
looks
fixed
like?
mindset. Yes, been there, done that. Pessimism, despair, when things, when we can't see the light of day, stagnation, low standards, underperformance. When we almost encourage that because we're walking in with an attitude of lower standards for ourselves, for other people. Mistakes are embarrassing. When we call people on mistakes in ways that to put the person down, people can't do much. And, and especially if we're blaming others for the failures. One of the things about good supervision is I take responsibility for things that go wrong because I'm going to work with you to help things go better. And you have all the praise when things go well. It's up to me to help you get to where you want to be as a worker. And it's up to me to recognize that you make great decisions and do good possibilities. So, taking responsibility for failures and rather than blaming anybody else, for us to recognize that, we have to recognize that our failures are ours and that we want to work forward with other people so that their mistakes are errors up, so they can fail up, and that, we don't want people to have low standards. We don't want them to underperform. That goes back to the quiet quitting. That's
Right.
what it looks like. And people looking for now a way out of the work because they're just not fulfilled. And we see that with millennials. We see that with Gen Z a lot, that people feel unappreciated, and therefore, why am I here? If I'm not appreciated, why should I stay here? If I'm not given responsibilities, why am I still here?
And I'll just add, David, that, in terms of blaming others for your failures, if you're in a situation or a culture where, you're always being penalized, you're going to get tired of that, and you're going to start to shift the blame because you're tired of being penalized. Or this isn't a culture that reflects any kind of learning from making mistakes. That's when the blame game kind of kicks in. And so we want to do things to actually move toward that growth mindset rather than that fixed mindset. So David, I'll give you the do's here for the growth mindset reinforcements.
Praise for effort, and making sure that people know that they've done a great job, and praising people for a decision, even if it's not a great decision. The idea that the person stepped up and tried something, we can always correct. Like I said, if there's no blood on the floor, we can work through this. Support for learning from failures. We talked about goal setting. Where do you want to be in 6 months? Where do you want to be in a couple of years? And encouraging people. One of the things to my mind in goal setting is that, and I used to say this in jobs that I've had before, I want to be able to take my supervisor's job. I want it to be so that I know enough and have enough experience here that I can step into a leadership position, and working with people to encourage leadership. It may not be that the person becomes a supervisor, but leadership rises up within a department, and people can take responsibility for their work and for other aspects of the work. So encouraging goal setting as we work forward.
And I'll just mention the don'ts. Don't praise for intelligence. There's no quicker way to derail people than just to make remarks about how smart they are, or because they're not going to be smart all the time. I'm not smart all the time. So then when you're praising them for their smartness, it's a high standard to live up to. You don't make defining statements, you're always late, Rob, or, those kinds of things that traps people in that box of the statement, and you just don't want to do that. Obviously, comparing staff to one another is a no-no. That sets up rivalries and just division where you don't want to do that. And finally, don't look for perfection because you will not find it. We are human, we will make mistakes.
Right.
So we're going to kind of move toward the ending here by talking about how we feel sometimes. And imagine, if we're feeling like this, what is our staff feeling like? And so this is our kind of a ending, really, maybe it's a conversation really about taking care of yourself.
Yeah,
Because, the work that we do is hard, especially, as supervisors. We sometimes take our work home, not maybe with, reports and things like that, but it's in our heads. The day that we had, the worries about the day. You have to do the work of self-care, because obviously it's about doing it for yourself, but you're a model. You're modeling to the rest of the staff as to how they should be taking care of themselves. So we want people to really take care of yourself, because if you're not going to be a very good mentor or supervisor to people that you're supervising.
Yeah, Crystal said earlier, I'm interested in a supervisor role. I'm concerned about the change in workload, expectations, and finding work-life balance. And I think this is, Crystal, this is where it becomes important to recognize, what do I need? And what do I need in the job, but what do I need in my personal life too? And recognizing that I can handle a lot of this, because you're going to have a supervisor yourself, and you're going to be able to go to that person as mentor as well. And you're going to be able to recognize what you need to do. But I think an important part of taking care of ourselves is recognizing that there is stuff that I can leave outside the door when I come into work. I drive 787 every day, and I have to leave 787 on the road when I come into work. And at the same time, when I leave here, I have to leave the office in the office, because it will be here for me tomorrow. And that's part of self-care, of taking care of myself as I move forward.
And there may be separating yourself from your phone. We carry our phones with us all the time. This means we're carrying work with us at all times. So maybe
and recognize that, an email that comes in at 10 o'clock just means the person thought of it then, doesn't mean you should be answering it.
Yeah. You have to do what's comfortable for you. If you feel like answering, go ahead and answer it. But if you feel like it's a chore to do it at that time, it's probably not the best time to do it.
Right.
Because then, if we're tired, I may craft my email. My email might sound a bit annoying. I'm annoyed that I'm getting back to you, because I'm kind of reacting on an emotional level there. So our final slide is this: that leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence, and making sure that the impact lasts in your absence. The best supervisors, the best managers, when they leave, and we will all leave to do other things, the team doesn't fall apart, because you've done the job of developing your team in your absence. Those are the best supervisors, because they've done that.
Yeah, that whole sense of knowing the job well enough, and knowing your style and what is expected, and being able to move forward regardless. People being able to step into leadership roles. I think encouraging people to develop leadership qualities is always important, because leadership qualities are the qualities we want to see in the people around us. Doesn't mean the person's going to be in charge. That doesn't, that's not what leadership is always about. Leadership is always about moving forward and being an example and recognizing that there is something greater that we're all moving toward. And I want to be part of that, and I want to be in the vanguard as I move
You
forward.
really don't have to be a supervisor to be that leader.
Right, absolutely not.
All right, well, I want to put up the date for our statewide training that's going to be occurring in October. It'll be October 4th from 1 to 4 p.m. This is the new supervisors orientation, understanding your role. It'll be the full training, 1 to 4. We'll be getting word out about that as we move closer, probably toward the end of the summer with a Zoom link. People can register then, and we usually have about 100 plus for the new hire orientation. So we'll probably have a number of people that are signing up for this.
Yes, come
So
back.
we have, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, come back. You can experience the full thing, and you'll get to see Rob and me and Larry as well. So I promise you a good time.
So we have time for one question. Let's see if there's any questions that people may have.
You know, while people are typing, I just want to also remind them about the CEU process, that they will get an evaluation and the email in 24 hours. They'll have 48 hours to get that back finished online in order to get their CEUs. And that everybody who received any notice, whether it was on LinkedIn or an email, will receive a notice with the link for that 3-hour training. It will be available in all the same spots. So if you saw it now, you'll see it then. So, and while anybody looks to put anything they can in the chat, any last question or comments, I want to thank you guys for a great job and thank everybody for attending and participating. We had great discussion, even though you had to type it out. We really appreciate that. This went great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Larry. And again, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you all for being here.